Rachel had always been drawn to helping others. From a young age, she found joy in comforting those who were hurting, whether it was soothing a crying child or sitting with a grieving friend. That innate compassion led her to become a nurse, and now, at 28 years old, she worked tirelessly at a hospice care facility, a place where patients spent their final days surrounded by dignity and warmth. The hospice was quiet but far from empty. Every room held stories of lives lived fully, or sometimes partially, and Rachel made it her mission to ensure each patient felt seen and valued. She moved through the halls with gentle purpose, administering medication, adjusting pillows, and offering soft words of reassurance. To Rachel, this wasn't just a job. It was an opportunity to make someone's last chapter meaningful. Among her patients was Mr. Whitaker, an elderly man in his mid-70s whose frail frame and weary eyes spoke volumes about his journey. He had no family left. His wife had passed away years ago, and they never had children. Friends seemed distant memories, lost to time and circumstance. Most days he sat alone by the window, gazing out at the world beyond the glass, his silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. Rachel noticed him immediately, not because he demanded attention, but because of how deeply he seemed to fade into the background. Something about his quiet demeanor tugged at her heartstrings. Determined to reach him, she began spending extra moments by his bedside, even when her schedule didn't require it. At first, he responded with polite nods or faint smiles, but gradually he started opening up. One afternoon, as Rachel adjusted his blanket, Mr. Whitaker murmured softly, "You don't have to stay, you know? I'm just waiting." His voice carried both resignation and sadness. "I want to," Rachel replied gently, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "We're here together." That simple exchange marked the beginning of their bond, a connection neither of them expected, but both desperately needed. Little did Rachel know, her kindness would leave a legacy far greater than she could imagine. Over the next few weeks, Rachel made it her mission to bring light into Mr. Whitaker's otherwise lonely days. She started small, bringing him fresh flowers from the hospice garden or playing soft classical music in his room. Gradually, she noticed subtle changes in him. The corners of his mouth would lift slightly when she entered, and he'd occasionally offer a quiet "thank you" before retreating back into silence. One afternoon, as Rachel adjusted the curtains to let in more sunlight, she spotted a well-worn book resting on his bedside table. "Do you like reading?" she asked, picking it up gently. "It was my wife's favorite," Mr. Whitaker replied, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "She used to read it to me." Rachel smiled warmly. "Would you like me to read some of it to you?" He hesitated, then nodded faintly. As she began reading aloud, his eyes softened, and for the first time, Rachel saw a flicker of peace in his expression. From that day forward, their shared readings became a daily ritual. They moved from his wife's books to other classics, each chapter drawing them closer together. As trust grew between them, Mr. Whitaker began opening up about his life, the joys and sorrows that shaped him. He spoke of meeting his wife at a summer fair, their dreams of traveling the world, and the heartbreak of losing her too soon. He reminisced about tending to his garden, where roses climbed trellises and lavender scented the air. "I miss getting my hands dirty," he admitted one evening, staring out the window at the fading sunset. Rachel listened intently, storing every detail in her heart. When she wasn't caring for other patients, she researched ways to bring pieces of his past into the present. One weekend, she brought him a small potted plant, a fragrant herb reminiscent of the ones he once grew. His eyes lit up as he touched the leaves, inhaling deeply. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. This means so much." Their bond deepened further during quieter moments. Sometimes, Rachel would simply sit beside him, holding his hand as they watched the clouds drift across the sky. Other times, she'd share stories of her own life, her childhood adventures, her love for painting, and her dreams of traveling someday. In return, Mr. Whitaker offered wisdom gleaned from decades of living. "Life is short," he told her once, "but kindness makes it longer, for everyone involved." Rachel cherished these exchanges, finding solace in their connection even as she braced herself for the inevitable. Hospice work was rewarding but heartbreaking, and she knew Mr. Whitaker's time was limited. Yet, instead of focusing on loss, she poured her energy into making his remaining days as beautiful as possible. One evening, as Rachel tucked a blanket around him, Mr. Whitaker grasped her hand weakly. "You remind me of her," he said softly, referring to his late wife. "So full of warmth. I'm glad I got to know you." Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes, but she blinked them away, smiling. "Me too, Mr. Whitaker. Me too." Unbeknownst to Rachel, these moments were planting seeds of gratitude in Mr. Whitaker's heart, seeds that would soon bloom into something extraordinary. As the weeks passed, Mr. Whitaker's health began to decline rapidly. The once lively spark in his eyes dimmed, and his body grew weaker with each passing day. Yet, Rachel remained steadfast by his side, ensuring he never felt alone. She stayed late into the evenings, reading softly under the glow of a bedside lamp or playing music that reminded him of happier times. On particularly difficult nights, she held his hand, whispering reassurances that it was okay to let go. One evening, as rain pattered gently against the window, Mr. Whitaker turned to Rachel with an uncharacteristic clarity in his gaze. "You've given me so much," he murmured, his voice faint but filled with emotion. "More than I deserved." Rachel shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. "No, Mr. Whitaker. It's been my honor to know you. You've taught me so much about life and love." He smiled faintly, squeezing her hand weakly. "Promise me one thing," he said, pausing to catch his breath. "Don't stop being who you are. The world needs more people like you." "I promise," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. "And thank you for trusting me enough to share your stories, for letting me be here with you." That night marked a turning point. Though Mr. Whitaker lingered for a few more days, his strength continued to wane. On a quiet morning bathed in soft sunlight, he passed away peacefully, surrounded by the warmth and care Rachel had always provided. When she learned of his passing, Rachel stepped outside, leaning against the hospice wall as tears streamed down her face. Losing him felt like losing a piece of her own family. In the weeks that followed, Rachel struggled to fill the void left by Mr. Whitaker's absence. She threw herself into her work, channeling her grief into caring for other patients. But no matter how busy she kept herself, memories of their bond lingered. The way he'd smile at her jokes, the gratitude in his eyes, the quiet wisdom he'd shared. He had become more than just a patient. He was a friend, a confidant, and someone who had profoundly impacted her life. Then, months later, an unexpected letter arrived at Rachel's apartment. The envelope bore the insignia of a law firm, its contents formal yet intriguing. Curious, Rachel opened it and read through the carefully worded document inside. Her heart raced as she realized what it meant. Mr. Whitaker had included her in his will. Shocked and overwhelmed, Rachel immediately called the number listed in the letter. A meeting was arranged, and the following week, she found herself sitting across from a kind-faced lawyer named Mrs. Adler. The office was warm and inviting, but Rachel couldn't shake the nervous energy coursing through her veins. "Miss Carter," Mrs. Adler began, placing a folder on the desk. Mr. Whitaker made specific arrangements regarding certain assets to express his gratitude for those who touched his life deeply. "Among them is you." Rachel blinked, stunned. "Me? But I don't understand." Mrs. Adler smiled gently. "He left you a house, a cottage to be exact, and a substantial savings account. It was his way of honoring the compassion and care you showed him during his final days." Rachel's hands trembled as she accepted the documents. Enclosed with the legal paperwork was a handwritten note from Mr. Whitaker himself. Her breath caught as she unfolded it and began to read. "Dear Rachel, if you're reading this, then I've moved on to whatever comes next. I want you to know how much your kindness meant to me. You treated me like family when I had none, and for that, I'll forever be grateful. The cottage was my wife's pride and joy. It's where we built our happiest memories. Now I leave it to you, hoping it brings you as much peace and joy as it did us." Take care of yourself and keep spreading the light you shared with me. The world is brighter because of you. With deepest thanks, Mr. Whitaker." Tears blurred Rachel's vision as she clutched the note to her chest. She hadn't expected anything in return for her care. Her actions were driven purely by compassion. Yet here was proof that even the smallest acts of kindness could leave an indelible mark. When the meeting ended, Rachel stepped outside, the weight of Mr. Whitaker's generosity settling over her. She thought about all the moments they'd shared, the laughter, the tears, the quiet companionship, and realized his gift wasn't just material. It was symbolic. It was his way of saying, "You mattered to me." Little did Rachel know, this inheritance would change not only her life but also the lives of countless others she would touch in the future. In the days following the lawyer's revelation, Rachel found herself struggling to process the magnitude of Mr. Whitaker's gift. The house, a cozy cottage nestled at the edge of town, was surrounded by a lush garden filled with roses, lavender, and herbs. It was exactly as he'd described it during their conversations about his wife's love for gardening. Walking through the front door for the first time felt surreal, like stepping into a memory she wasn't part of but somehow belonged to. The interior was simple yet charming, with wooden floors, vintage furniture, and shelves lined with books. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the walls. In the kitchen, Rachel discovered jars of preserves labeled in neat handwriting, remnants of Mrs. Whitaker's meticulous care. Everywhere she looked, there were echoes of the life Mr. Whitaker had cherished so deeply, and now it was hers. At first, Rachel wrestled with guilt. "I don't deserve this," she muttered aloud one evening, sitting on the porch as twilight painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. She thought about all the other nurses who worked tirelessly alongside her, caring for patients without expecting anything in return. Why had Mr. Whitaker chosen her? But as she reread his note for the 100th time, its message began to sink in. This wasn't just about her. It was about what she represented: kindness, compassion, and the power of human connection. Mr. Whitaker hadn't given her the house out of obligation. He'd given it as a symbol of gratitude, a reminder that even the smallest acts of love could leave lasting legacies. Determined to honor his memory, Rachel decided to use the inheritance wisely. She started by renovating parts of the cottage, transforming it into a space that reflected both her personality and Mr. Whitaker's spirit. She planted new flowers in the garden, adding vibrant colors that seemed to breathe life into the property. Inside, she created a small memorial corner dedicated to Mr. Whitaker and his wife, complete with framed photographs and mementos from their lives together. Rachel also began channeling some of the funds toward improving conditions at the hospice. She donated money to purchase new equipment, organize art therapy sessions for patients, and create a serene outdoor garden where families could find solace. The staff and patients alike were overwhelmed by her generosity, unaware of the source behind it. To them, it simply reinforced what they already knew. Rachel was extraordinary. One afternoon, Rachel visited Mr. Whitaker's grave for the first time since receiving the inheritance. Armed with fresh flowers and a heart full of gratitude, she knelt before the headstone engraved with his name. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is more than I ever imagined, but I promise to make it count. For you, for your wife, and for everyone who needs a little extra light in their lives." As she stood up, brushing dirt from her knees, Rachel noticed a young couple nearby tending to another grave. They glanced at her curiously, and she offered them a warm smile. For a brief moment, she considered sharing Mr. Whitaker's story, but decided against it. Some gifts weren't meant to be explained. They were meant to inspire action. Over time, Rachel came to terms with the inheritance, viewing it not as a reward but as a responsibility. It wasn't just about financial security. It was about continuing the cycle of kindness that Mr. Whitaker had ignited. Every act of generosity she extended, every patient she comforted, felt like a tribute to the man who had believed in her when she least expected it. And so, Rachel embraced her new chapter, not as someone defined by wealth, but as someone empowered to spread even more love and compassion. The cottage became her sanctuary, a place where she could recharge before returning to the hospice to pour her heart into helping others. Through it all, she carried Mr. Whitaker's words close to her heart. Keep spreading the light. Little did Rachel know, her journey was far from over, and the ripple effects of Mr. Whitaker's generosity were only beginning to unfold. With Mr. Whitaker's gift came a renewed sense of purpose for Rachel. She returned to the hospice with an unwavering determination to honor his memory by making every patient's final days as meaningful as possible. Her colleagues noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor. She seemed lighter, yet more grounded, as if she carried a secret strength within her. What they didn't know was that this newfound energy stemmed from gratitude and responsibility, not just personal fulfillment. Rachel began mentoring new nurses, sharing stories about Mr. Whitaker to emphasize the profound impact kindness could have. It's not just about easing physical pain, she'd explain during training sessions. It's about seeing the person behind the illness, their hopes, fears, and memories. Sometimes, all it takes is sitting quietly with them or holding their hand to remind them they're not alone. She also introduced initiatives inspired by her experiences with Mr. Whitaker. A memory wall was set up in the hospice lobby, where patients' families could post photos, letters, or drawings celebrating their loved ones' lives. Rachel often found herself pausing in front of it, smiling at the colorful tapestry of stories that reminded her why she chose this path. On weekends, Rachel opened the cottage garden to former hospice patients' families, inviting them to plant flowers or simply sit among the blooms in remembrance. The space became a haven of healing, a place where grief mingled with beauty and love transcended loss. Neighbors who had never met Rachel marveled at her generosity, unaware of the quiet revolution of compassion she was spearheading. One evening, as Rachel sat on the porch of the cottage watching fireflies dance in the twilight, she reflected on how far she'd come since meeting Mr. Whitaker. His gift had given her stability, yes, but more importantly, it had deepened her understanding of humanity's interconnectedness. Every act of kindness created ripples, touching lives in ways no one could predict. Her thoughts drifted to the future. Perhaps someday, she'd write a book about Mr. Whitaker's story, sharing it with others to inspire acts of selflessness. Or maybe she'd expand the garden into a community center focused on end-of-life care and remembrance. Whatever lay ahead, Rachel knew one thing for certain. She would spend the rest of her life paying forward the legacy Mr. Whitaker entrusted to her. As the stars began to twinkle above, Rachel whispered softly into the night, "Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. You gave me so much more than a home. You gave me a mission." And with that, she rose from her chair, ready to face whatever tomorrow held, armed with love, courage, and an unshakable belief in the power of kindness. Rachel's journey was a testament to the ripple effect of kindness. What began as small acts of compassion, reading books, planting flowers, holding hands, had transformed not only Mr. Whitaker's final days, but also her own life and the lives of countless others. His unexpected gift became a catalyst for change, inspiring Rachel to create spaces of comfort, connection, and healing for those navigating life's most difficult moments. The cottage garden flourished under her care, becoming a symbol of hope and renewal. Families visited to remember their loved ones, planting seeds that grew into vibrant blooms, a living reminder that love endures even after loss. At the hospice, Rachel's initiatives sparked a cultural shift, encouraging staff and patients alike to celebrate life in all its fragility and beauty. Through it all, Rachel carried Mr. Whitaker's note close to her heart, revisiting his words whenever doubt crept in. "Keep spreading the light," he'd written, and she did, one act of kindness at a time. Years later, when people asked about the origins of her work, Rachel would simply smile and say, "It started with a man who taught me that even the smallest gestures can leave the biggest legacies." As she watched another sunset from the porch of the cottage, surrounded by the fruits of gratitude and compassion, Rachel realized something profound. True wealth wasn't measured in houses or savings. It was found in the connections we forge and the love we share. And in honoring Mr. Whitaker's memory, she had discovered a treasure far greater than anything money could buy. The world felt brighter because of them both.